I had a client, a surgical prosthodontist, ADHD, mid-30s, and building a partnership business on the side so that he could leave his job entirely. His days would involve 3 or 4 patients at once, major procedures back-to-back, fully on for 10 plus hours before he clocked out. Every evening, the plan was the same: get home and work on the exit. And for 3 straight weeks, it kept collapsing. 5 o'clock would come, and somehow it was 7 p.m. before he touched anything. Honestly, my read for those first 3 weeks was that maybe it's a timing problem, maybe a motivation problem. So we adjusted the schedule, we tried again, and it didn't work. So it wasn't that. Then in week 4, he said something small that cracked the entire thing open. If I stay in, which is where he worked, by the way, it drags. 5 becomes 7 very quickly. His body was driving home, but his brain never left the office. The fix wasn't some new routine, it was one very simple rule: leave the city before making any decision. Once that was installed, his after-work block that had been failing for 3 weeks straight finally started to work. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at why the thing that looks like a motivation problem almost never is, a 65-year experiment involving Soviet foxes that explains exactly what was happening to my client, and probably you as well, the mechanism behind it, and the 4 specific levers that you can install tonight. And if you're a working professional who's trying to build something on the side and any of this sounds familiar, click the first link in the description to work directly with me. And with that, let's talk about dogs and wolves. Wolf, the dog, and the environment that changed everything. Understand that your entire life you've been suffering from a very common misdiagnosis. You tell yourself that, oh, I simply need to want it more. If I had more discipline, I'd be consistent enough to finally do the things that I'm trying to do. Whether that's building a business on the side, learning a skill, getting a certificate, whatever it is that's going to take you to the next level. You tell yourself that it's a discipline problem, that it's a motivation, willpower. If I put in more effort, I would get things done. And that feels true because the failure is so consistent that it makes it seem like a character issue. Again, you kind of conditioned yourself into this state of thinking because of your constant failures when it comes to consistency, always starting and stopping, never being able to maintain momentum long enough to get something done. You've begun to now apply that characteristic of said failure to yourself. Oh, it's a problem with me. If I was more disciplined, if I was more consistent, if I was more locked in, I'd be able to get things done. But that's not the case at all, because you need to understand that your behavior, the actions that you take, is downstream of your environment, not upstream. What that means is your behavior stems from the environment and not the other way around. And the way I'm going to explain this is, imagine that you clone yourself for some reason, and now you're in 2 different locations. Clone A is in a library. Let's make it purple. Clone A is in the library. Clone B is at a party or a rave or something. Now, when you're inside of a library, I want you to think for a second and tell me, what kind of action would you be taking? Probably reading, studying, doing some form of learning. But now let's say that you are at a party. Are you going to be in the corner, reading Shakespeare's latest novel? Are you going to be reading How to Win Friends and Influence People? No, you're going to be talking to people, partying, having some fun, getting a little dance on, right? You're not going to be doing any of those things that you're doing in a library. Why? Because the environment changed. It's no longer the same. Because your environment changed, so did your actions, so did the behaviors that said environment elicits. Now, this same thing applies to my client. It wasn't that he was just undisciplined. He was in an environment that made the wrong behavior the easiest one. And that's a very dangerous environment to be in. Why? Because as humans, we like to naturally take the path of least resistance. If the easiest thing to do is fall into distractions, dopamine, stimulation, when distraction is easy, then you will do it. There's nothing, very complex or revolutionary about that statement. If distraction is the path of least resistance, and you are going to take that path, and you are going to get distracted, you're not going to get anything done. And the same thing that involved my client is the same thing that you're dealing with right now. You think that your environment is neutral. Okay, I'm just here. I'll just do what I need to do and I'll move on, right? But that's not the case at all. Your environment is not neutral. It's already selecting for something. To explain this, we're going to be looking at the wolf and the dog. Now, realize that dogs and wolves share 99% of their DNA, meaning they're essentially the same species. Genetically speaking, there aren't too many differences between them, like 0.01%. Like it's almost non-existent, right? So they're essentially the same animal. Well, behaviorally rather, they are almost unrecognizable from each other. And the question remains is why? Why are wolves so different from dogs? They're basically the same species, but the way that they act is so drastically night and day from each other. Well, there's a reason for that, and that reason is not genetic, but it's environmental and developmental. What does that mean? Well, depending on the environment that the species grows in, it will either, have more traits of the dog or have more traits of the wolf. And this is due to over 15,000 years of proximities to human. Again, the environment did the selecting the generation by generation. As wolves became more accustomed to being around humans, they began to have more traits that you see within the common dog. Again, it wasn't because they just became a new species, but because of their environment, it being close to humankind, they had more traits that were friendly to humans, i.e., dogs. And this was actually scientifically proved in an experiment, specifically the Belyaev experiment. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. I am not a Russian, just in case you could not tell. But in 1959, a Soviet scientist by the name of Dmitry Belyaev, very cool name to have, right? But Mr. Dmitry, right, he had a hypothesis that if I select for one single trait, tameness towards humans, then I can basically create dogs, or a dog-like species in terms of friendliness to humans, right? So what he did is he took some foxes, I believe it was 30 male foxes and 100 female foxes, and he put them into a farm. It was a controlled experiment, controlled environment. Just had to fix my pin, but where were we? Yes. Ultimately, starting out with your average level fox, so very skittish, aggressive, silver foxes from a fur farm. But the way the experiment was run, that only the least fearful, least aggressive foxes were allowed to breed generation by generation. So they didn't give them any training. There wasn't any conditioning. There was no interference other than being able to be around humans for a short amount of time. But only the foxes that showed that positive, that less aggressive behavior towards humans were allowed to breed and continue breeding on them. And so what ends up happening is that by generation 6, you had the first tame foxes appear. Then by generation 10, 18% were showing that tame profile. Again, it's slowly increasing and increasing and increasing, again, merely solely due to the environment that these foxes find themselves in. By generation 45, and each generation is a year as foxes breed annually, but by the 45th generation, nearly the entire line of foxes had now this tame, very conducive way of acting when it came to being around humans. So even when it came to their physical traits, right? Nobody, things that the Mr. Dmitry was not selecting for. Having floppy ears, curled tails, piebald coats, right? All of these things happening, again, because of the environment that these foxes found themselves within. Now, there was also another line of the experiment that went the other way. This time, instead, breeding for that more aggressive trait. So those who were the type of fox, very aggressive, very skittish, very agitated when it came to being around humans. And again, same species, same starting point, but this time with the opposite environment. What do you know? The opposite outcome had ended up taking place as well. Meaning that the environment directly influenced the traits that were bred within the foxes. Now, what exactly does this have to do with you? Well, the mechanism, which I'm calling the tame line, is what we're going to be discussing here. But Bevlop, again, he ran two lines at once, same species, but opposite selection environments. One environment led to the foxes having a more favorable way of acting towards humans, whereas the other one made them a lot more aggressive, meaning the environment directly influenced the genetic evolution of a species. But you've been running this experiment on yourself, and you've been running it every single evening, every time you get home. And each evening is a generation that is taking place. Right now, without knowing it, you might possibly be breeding rather that aggressive line. Aggressive in this case being the line, the path that leads you towards dopamine and stimulation, right? You get home, you know, let me just take a quick break and pick up my phone. Next thing you know, it's 9 o'clock and you haven't done a single thing, right? Again, without knowing it, you're likely breeding this aggressive line. But what exactly does that mean? Again, in a sense, you are conditioning yourself, rather evolving yourself to be more likely to get distracted, get addicted to dopamine, waste time rather than achieve your goals and get things done. And there are 4 levers that once understand, you're going to be able to make a change in the right direction. Lever 1 is to remove what selects for the wrong behavior. Again, you need to adapt your environment to elicit the behaviors that you'd like it to have. Same way with Dimitri and the experiment with the foxes, right? The environment that led the foxes to have more favorable way of acting towards humans was done deliberately so. The same way with the opposite direction of the foxes that ended up being more aggressive. The reason for that split, that difference, is because of their environment. If you want to have the actions of someone who is consistent or disciplined, then your environment should reflect that. I.e., when you sit down to work, your phone should not be right next to you. So put your phone in another room before sitting down to work. Because when your phone's right there, that's visual stimulation, notifications are popping up, you're thinking about it. Doesn't matter if you're logged in. Your phone's right there in the corner. You're likely going to pick it up. Oh, let me scroll. Funny reel, haha, Instagram shorts, right? Again, this is just very naturally, very likely going to pull you in. You're going to get distracted. You're not going to get anything done. Work only browser profile. Having a profile on your browser, I'm pretty sure Chrome does it. I'm not too certain about the other browsers, but some browsers, they have profiles, right? You can log on to a profile specifically for work where everything else is blocked. Everything else is it's just you and the task at hand, right? There's no way, shape, or form to kind of get distracted or pulled off into some random direction. Why? Because your environment is only allowing one action to take place. And last, no TV before the session. And I put TV here, but that applies to all forms of mindless dopamine stimulation. So no phone, video games, anime, Netflix, whatever the case is, right? Don't watch that. Don't do that before your work session, because what that is going to do to your dopamine, it'll be a little bit something like this, right? Again, you're spiking your dopamine all the way up here. Haha, funny YouTube videos, whatever the case is. And then you're going to ask your dopamine to drop all the way back down here to get some work done. And it's not going to undo that because it's going from high stimulation to low stimulation. A lot of resistance is going to be there. You're naturally going to avoid that behavior. So do not watch TV, Netflix, Instagram before going into a work session. It's only going to make it that much more difficult. Level 2 is creating consistent cues. Now, what do I mean when I say that? When it came to the environment with the foxes, again, they were in that same environment, doing the same things over and over and over again, right? The foxes who were, again, more favorable towards humans, again, all of that happening at the same time, meaning that if you can replicate that in a sense, when it comes to your own work environment, then you're going to be much more likely to get the work done. So whenever you're getting the work done, have it done the same time every single evening without fail. Same location as well, right? The desk becomes the cue. You sit down at your desk, your brain instantly goes into work mode the same way you walk into a library. Okay, it's time to be quiet. It's time to lock in. It's time to study. The same way you walk into a party. Okay, let's get a groove on. Let's dance. Let's have some fun, right? That environment becomes the cue of the action that you want to take. And again, same preceding action every single time. So before you sit down to work, set a timer, drink some water, and maybe do some stretching, whatever the case is. If you do the very same thing before, you're in a sense conditioning yourself the same way Pavlov did with this experiment of the dogs, right? For those who aren't familiar with that one, again, the guy by the name of Pavlov essentially conditioned dogs into listening to a bell, and they would think food is coming. The way he did it is every time Pavlov would go and feed the dog, he would ring a bell right before. Eventually, the dogs began to associate that bell with food. Every time Pavlov rang the bell, the dogs began to salivate because in their minds, oh, bell equals food. In your mind, desk needs to equal work. So again, the more you kind of repeat that same action, the stronger the neural pathways are going to get in your brain. The more likely, when you enter into that space where you're doing that more self-directed work, when you walk into it, your brain is instantly going to switch over to that kind of task. You're going to get that thing done. Moving on, Level 3, you need to make the right behavior the path of least resistance. This is taking advantage of human psychology. As humans, as a species, we like to take the path of least resistance, that path that is the status quo, the thing that's comfortable, the thing that's easy, the thing that requires the least amount of effort. So we need to, in some way, shape, or form, make getting the work done that path of least resistance. First, that involves removing distractions, because as long as distractions are there, doesn't matter how easy, frictionless, effortless you make the work, you're always going to want to get dopamine, because that's basically an effort level of 0. Right? Work is always going to have some sort of effort. Your brain knows that. So it's naturally just going to veer towards the thing that, oh, I just pick up my phone and start scrolling. Oh, I just click this little button here. I'll watch some Netflix latest TV show, right? Again, that stuff is very easy to do in comparison to the work. So first, it's always getting rid of the distraction, but now we need to make effort, focus, getting the work done as simple as possible. Way you can do that is first deciding the action the night before. A large reason as to why procrastination and inconsistency happens is because there was no pre-established plan. If you go into the day with and this needs to be specific, you need to know exactly what I'm going to do, not just, okay, I'll sit down and I'll work on the business, or I'll work on the content, or I'll do some of the certificate. No, it needs to be specific. I am going to sit down, I'm going to write 5 cold emails, I'm going to make 10 cold calls, I'm going to finish this module of the course, I'm going to read this chapter of the book. Make it specific, because when you sit down without a concrete plan, what you're doing is you're sitting down into a void, an empty, vast expanse. And the thing about voids is that they always need to be filled. I'm sure you've seen those movies in space where, like, they'll open the hangar door and then everything starts flying out. That's because space is a void, and space wants to be filled with something, right? So if you go into it with the void, well, that space is not going to remain a void, but it's going to be filled. What will it be filled with? Dopamine. Or distraction. Stimulation. When there's nothing to fill that gap, it's going to be filled with the easiest thing it can find, which 9 times out of 10 times out of 10 is going to be some form of mindless consumption of dopamine or stimulation. Next, again, this having the project file already open, where the laptop screen opens. This is a little more of a bit more specific. If you're doing something on a computer, then kind of set that up beforehand, in a sense, is the point here, right? If it's not something computer, maybe you're like reading a book or something, well, have the book on your desk, bookmark ready, maybe even have the book open to the page you're going to be reading. Or maybe you're trying to learn some kind of skill, instrument, whatever the case may be. Well, set that thing up beforehand, right? When you sit down, you should know exactly what you're going to do, and there should be as minimal amount of steps possible for you to start doing that thing. Because the more steps there are, the more perceived effort your brain thinks, the less likely, the more adverse you will feel to doing that thing, hence procrastination. So if you make getting the thing done as easy as possible, if you know exactly what you're going to do when you do decide to get it done, then now there's no lack of mental clarity, and there's also the physical clarity as well. I can just sit down and get straight to work. I can sit down, pick up the instrument. I can sit down, do the course, sit down, read the book. It should be as easy as sitting down and starting the thing. Any more steps, any added steps is just going to make it that much harder to actually get something done. And last, you need to predetermine the length. So not any in-the-moment decisions or anything like that, because that creates decision fatigue, and it's adding to the perceived mental effort. Not only do I have to sit down, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how long I'm going to do it. And there's nothing like cueing me into doing it either. So you're just not going to get it done. And you're like, oh, Lim, why am I so inconsistent? Why am I so disciplined? When was the last time you took a look at your environment? Is the environment that you're trying to be disciplined or consistent in, is it one that is conducive to discipline, to consistency? Or is it conducive to dopamine, distraction, stimulation, wasted time? Ask yourself. I'm sure you can very easily tell with just a quick glance. If you fall into that latter half, where your environment is geared towards wasting time, then that means you need to change your environment. Last, lever 4 is adding social selection. When it came to the wolves, another part of the reason why their traits rather adapted in a specific direction is because they were around humans. If you just left the wolves to their own devices on the farm, then there would have been no, rather not wolves, the foxes, but if you had left them to their own devices on the farm, nothing would have changed, right? But because the humans were there, they were able to interact with those who had their favorable interactions. They were able to breed. Those who did not, they were unable to, right? So generation after generation after generation after generation, The foxes then became like dog-like foxes in a sense, having the same character traits as dogs, like wagging their tails, being happy when they would see the humans come, right? Again, all that happened because of that social proximity, and it applies to you as well. Accountability creates real social cause for not doing the thing. If you make a promise to somebody, hey, I'm going to be here tomorrow and I'm going to get a work on it, and they're there tomorrow and you're not, you're going to feel a sense of guilt. Oh man, I just let this person down. Can't believe I did that. And you best believe when tomorrow, the next time comes, you're going to be there again, because now you have that experience of, oh, it's not just me. Now I'm connecting this to someone else. I can't, again, if I don't show up, if I don't do it, how does that make me look? How is that for them, right? The added social cue, or added social selection rather, makes it a lot easier to actually carry out a desired behavior. So this could be anything, weekly check-ins, maybe, someone who knows the commitment, maybe it's a daily check-in, maybe it's a, call every month, whatever the case is, right? The more frequent, the more likely you are to do the thing. But again, that's also nuanced. It depends on what exactly it is that you are doing, whether it's business, skill, certification, course, whatever, something you're trying to learn, right? But understand, like, having that level of accountability is going to bring you a long way. And last, again, this is not motivational. It is environmental. Again, it's not a matter of, oh, you just got to watch 3 a.m. motivation content, wake up tomorrow, it's time to lock in 14-hour days. No, because you've tried that before. You've tried motivation. You've tried all the tactics, yet you're still watching this video. What you need to do is change your environment. And there's proof behind this. It's not just some random metaphor analogy that I decided to come up with. Excuse me. But again, when it came to my client, his first lever was geography. When he left his work city, before he made any other decision, he was actually able to consistently start making progress towards starting that partnership business. Again, but 3 weeks of a motivational problem were resolved by one environmental cue. This is something I've literally seen take place. Research in other areas backs it up. Again, 3 weeks of trying to do the same thing. Oh, it was a motivation. No, just needs more discipline. Oh, it's time management, right? It wasn't any of those things. It was quite literally the environment that he was in. When he left that environment, his brain was able to mentally leave work, and he actually started making progress towards starting his business. Now, we need to look at this from an angle of generations as well. Again, the domestication of the fox, it took a very long time. 45 years is like when around, a majority of them started to have those traits. But even now, I believe the experiment is still continuing onward today. But it took generations, but almost invisible during the first few generations as well. An observer, if they were looking at generation 3, they would think, okay, this experiment is a failure. Nothing's happening. Nothing changed. This is just a waste of time. But understand that this is applied over a very long time frame. Again, you can't just look at generation 3 and decide, this isn't working, and quit. You need to see this through to the end. You need to give it at least a certain amount of time before you conclude without a shadow of a doubt that, oh, this is not working. But in your case, obviously, we're not doing this over the course of generations, but we've got days, weeks, months, right? But for you, a generation is a day. But most people quit around week 2 or week 3, right? Even if they get that far, they try it for a few times. Oh, I'm not making progress. Oh, nothing is changing. Oh, this isn't working, right? And they'll just quit before they actually see the results of the painstaking effort that they were putting in. Again, most people quitting too early around week 2 or week 3. Why? Because it does not look like it's progress. But, again, you can think of it like your nails. Yeah, your nails grow. You don't see them growing, but next thing you know, you look at them, oh, I need to trim. Where the nail clipper's at, right? Again, same thing. You need to give this time. It's not going to, you're not going to wake up tomorrow after changing your environment. It's instantly be David Goggins level consistency. This is something that's going to take time, but I guarantee you it's going to work. Again, tying this back into my client, his after work block was still location dependent at week 4. That's not failure. That's generation 6, not 45. Again, after that, he was able to change, get into that scenario, rather that framing of changing his location. Again, he started making progress towards the things that he was trying to accomplish. Again, by the time week 4 came, he went from, still being location dependent. Right now, every time he left work, he could get things done. But now understand this on an identity level as well. Realize that the wolf is not less capable than the dog. Even in most cases, if you're out hunting, you'd probably want the wolf, right? It's more capable, more independent, more of that like hunter mentality, right? It's a lot more dangerous, right? If you got your average pit bull versus a gray wolf, obviously, give me the pit bull. I'm not fighting a freaking wolf. I would die. I mean, I'm not saying I'd beat the bulldog. No, I'd beat the bulldog. I'm not beating the wolf though. But again, 9 times out of 10, most cases, most scenarios, you'd rather have the wolf on your side if you're going into a fight. But again, it's not about capability. It's about the environment, right? The difference between behavior, again, always ties back into that environmental gap. Again, in the environment that's more conducive to, tranquility, okay, haha, funny human, let me go lick his hand and, let me go shake his hand. I don't, what foxes do, right? Versus the environment where the foxes are very aggressive, or only the aggressive foxes are being allowed to breed, then naturally they're going to progress towards aggression, or they're going to progress towards domestication. Tying that back together, right? You are not less capable than the people who you view as consistent or disciplined or locked in, right? You are no less capable than they are. The people that you see executing consistently, it's all tied into your environment. When you adapt your environment, rather, when you structure your environment to be conducive of the actions that lead to achieving a specific goal, naturally, you're going to be a lot more likely to achieve said specific goal. Again, there's nothing complex or, revolutionary, mind-blowing going on with this video. A lot of times, rather 9 times out of 10, the solution is always going to be the simplest one. We like to overcomplicate things. Oh, I need to dopamine detox, Pomodoro technique, morning routine for 2 hours, right? We like to overcomplicate things because we tend to think that complexity leads to results, when in reality, it's the opposite. It's like the 20%, like those very simple things, the fundamentals are going to lead to 80% of the results. And you'll see that 80-20 rule is actually insane. You literally see it everywhere. But especially when it comes to discipline consistency, it's always the simple things that yield the highest results. And even one more further connection that we can make, just like with Dimitri and his experiment with the foxes, he was only, opting or like looking for that one specific trait, the domestic ability, like the tame trait within the foxes. What ended up happening? Oh, their ears changes. They used to have this different tail shape. The color of their fur changed. And it's the same here as well, right? Once you start adapting your environment to be more conducive to consistency and getting things done, you're going to start seeing other traits about yourself improve as well. Those being self-trust, identity, things that you weren't directly going for or opting towards. Well, now they're going to start happening. The same way with the floppy ears. It's that correlated response to the environment. Understand that your environment is extremely powerful. I cannot stress this enough. But when you really prime that environment, when you really isolate it, when you really structure it in a way that is conducive to you getting what you want, you're going to be far more likely to get what you want. So let's recap. Understand that you are not facing a discipline problem. It's a problem with the selection of your environment. Again, 9 times out of 10, you're going home, your phone's right there, TV remote on the other hand, you got Netflix, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all these social medias, right? Obviously, naturally, that being the path of least resistance, you're going to find yourself veering into that direction. Change your environment, and you will change your life. Understand the tame line, right? When you engineer the environment so that the wanted behavior is the easiest behavior, then you're going to do it. Again, least resistance, right? It's very one-to-one. It's just simple logic here, right? When something is easy, you're going to do it. That's my entire philosophy. If you make something easy, if you make it simple, then simplicity scales, right? You're going to be more likely to do it. You're going to be more consistent. You're going to be more efficient. You're going to be more creative. Easy, simple is always best. And understand the 4 levers. First, remove, cue, ease, and accountability. Remove anything that is referring you towards distraction. Cue the habit or the action that you're trying to take. Ease it, make it as easy as possible, and then implement that level of accountability, having someone in your corner checking in on you. Hey, did you hit the gym today? Hey, did you work on the business today? Right? That level of accountability is going to make it far more likely for you to get the work done. So act as separate tonight. I want you to pick one lever, whether that lever is remove, cue, ease, or accountability, and then I want you to install it tonight. In fact, you can do it right now. Don't even wait until this video ends. I want you to pick one lever and solve it right now, whether that's removing the stimulation from your environment, queuing the task, making it easy, or maybe reach out to an accountability partner right now. Whatever the case is, I want you to Take action right now. And then again, I would recommend starting with level 1 or level 3 because these are the fastest to set up and fastest to prove that it's working. So either remove something or make something easy. Again, it's like it's so simple. It's so stupidly simple, but stupidly simple is always the best. So next step, again, if you're a working professional building something on the side, and this is the pattern that you're stuck in, click the first link in the description. You can apply to work with me, and we can get you moving in the right direction. So understand, I'll close things out, right? You're not trying to become a different animal. You're trying to build a different environment, because when the environment is different, you'll become a different animal by the laws of nature, right? Believ proved that it takes generations. It is not a single decision. It's not going to happen overnight. But if you do it, if you make it simple, if you make it easy, if you do it one night at a time, I guarantee you're going to get there, right? So install one lever tonight and give it more than 3 weeks before you decide to quit. Other than that, you can click the video here, or it might be there or somewhere around the screen if you want to learn something new. And I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.